Welcome to Property Addicts Australia, your home for everything property investing. Get an insider's view of what really works when building a portfolio. Learn how to avoid the common mistakes, plus get all the tips and tricks from the property investing experts Sana and Mona Ali. Join us to learn from the experts and set yourself up for long-term success in property investing. Proudly powered by propertytwins.com.au.
Today we have the privilege to interview one of our first inspirations in property, Victor Kumar, co-founder of the Right Property Group. We met Victor in 2010 when we were still early in our property journey, and just that one meeting with Victor just changed the trajectory as to what we can dream and what we can achieve in our life. Victor continues to help many or hundreds and thousands of investors out there with property investing as a buyer's agent and as a mentor. Welcome, Victor, and it's such a privilege to have you on Property Addicts Australia today.
Thank you, and thank you for that introduction. And this is really humbling because you mentioned that I changed the trajectory of your lives, right? And it is that gets me out of bed every day, and really makes me grateful to the knowledge I've got over my journey, and then really being able to share it out. And of course, by doing that, I get paid really well. But that's no longer the bit that gets me out of bed. It is more so the client results, the different people I cross paths with during my life, in my professional life and personal life, and seeing the generational difference that the advice, the passing of experience does make.
So, Victor, just going back with your story early on, I know we have a little bit of exposure as to where you started. Please tell us where it all started when you came to Australia. Going back.
God, how long do we have, right? Well, if you haven't already guessed, I am a migrant. So Reshmi, my beautiful wife, and I came into Australia in 1997, February 26th, 1997. In Fiji, so I come from Fiji. In Fiji, I was a lecturer at the School of Medicine, and was majoring in radiology, radiography and sonography. So, and Reshmi was a new graduate at the CWM hospital, which is the largest hospital in Fiji and the teaching hospital. And we migrated here, and we landed with a massive amount of cash, like $4,500. So
how did it feel in that moment?
Look, we came in with the thought process that, yes, we're going to make a difference in our lives. In Fiji, I was pretty much capped in terms of the salary that I was getting. There was no further scope for me. Reshmi had a bit of scope, but there's no further scope for me. And it was a natural progression to come here. And we spent the first 3 months living in my sister's garage, and then we got our first unit to rent. And that's how I found out about credit, because I went to Harvey Norman to get the TV, the sofa and all that. And they said, well, we can't give you the money because you don't have any credit history. Then that got me my first credit card. And one of the things I do is I read a lot, right? So as part of reading, I was reading goal-setting books, I was reading investment books, but none of it was making sense to me until it started becoming tangible. And we went to our first seminar, which was our first home buyers seminar. We bought our first home in 1998. This is the downside of timing, right? And hindsight. We exchanged contracts, and the day we unconditionally exchanged on the contracts, the New South Wales state government announced stamp duty concessions for first-home buyers, right? So learned that, okay, yeah, you just got to go with the punches. And then my first investment was really more of an accident than anything else, literally. I had a back injury at Liverpool Hospital, got a workers' comp payout, massive payout. $8,000. And at that time I was reading Jen Summers' books, and if really if anyone's starting out, whilst the information may be a little bit dated on that, the concepts are just right in terms of setting the foundational approach. So I think it was Building Wealth through Jen Summers. And because I read that book, I sort of wanted to leverage that money, and it became a bit too hard in getting advice from the brokers at that time. And I just bit the bullet, put the deposit down on the first unit that I bought, which was at that time, so talking 99, yeah, and the unit was $70,000, and the rent on it was $130 a week. After I took into account strata fees and everything, it broke even. So it made sense. And didn't know anything about research. A lot of people that I was talking to, and this is one of the things I learned during the journey, is that you don't want to take advice from family or friends unless they have more property achievements than you have, yeah, and have got more life battle scars than you have. So everyone's telling me that it hasn't moved for the last 8 years, and it hasn't done anything, so you shouldn't be buying that. But it worked out all right. Right?
Well, Sydney had a boom.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So at that time, it pretty much doubled in 3 years, which was fantastic. Mm-hmm. Then one of the things I learned from the books was they always ask the question in terms of opportunities, right? So Reshmi was working at a medical center as a radiographer. And that doctor's practice was opening up another medical center in Campbelltown. And I just mentioned in passing to Reshmi to say, hey, ask if whether they want a X-ray center in their medical center. And lo and behold, they said yes. And I go, all right, what have I done? So with no money, we approached one of my friends who was also a radiographer. And I put a proposal in front of him to say, okay, first 3 months I'll work for free. You put in the money, set up the practice, and we'll go, 30% me, 70% you. So I de-risked it totally for him. Mm-hmm. And so he put up the money. We started the medical center. At peak, it was 5 centers. The very first day that I resigned from Liverpool Hospital and then started working at the medical center as a self-employed person, opened the doors at 8 a.m. The first patient came at 4:30. Right?
Wow.
And I'm thinking, okay, no money coming in for 3 months. Looks like there won't be any money after 3 months if this carries on. And the second day it was still the same. So I started, basically didn't have the confidence to start talking to the doctors and market and then get referrals. So I started walking up and down the street, and there was a second-hand bookshop. And I went into there and I picked up a book called The Wealthy Barber. Mm-hmm. And because I had a lot of time on my hands, I started listening to it, so reading it. And then that led to another book. And before I knew it, I was pretty much dialed into how to create wealth. And we found that the practice was actually becoming a hurdle in terms of our investing. So I gave my shares back to my business partner. And this was year 2000. So we moved fast, right? Mm-hmm. We moved fast in that sense, right? So we gave the shares back, and we started working for a couple of practices down the south coast of Sydney. And that enabled us, therefore, to take days off, kill someone, go to a funeral, to attend seminars, right? And from every seminar, I took a piece of it and started making it my own. So my goal was simply, if I attend a seminar, I need to implement one thing from that seminar. If I attended a workshop, I need to implement one thing. And within a very short time space, we amassed quite a healthy portfolio. In May 20th, 2001, we actually resigned from our positions. The reason for resigning was more, life thrusts opportunities to you. And there's 2 ways, right? You can see the opportunity as a problem, or you can actually see it for what it really is, an opportunity to scale, to become bigger, to become better. And we decided at the time, but Reshmi was not being promoted to the position that she wanted to, even though she would train people, but they get promoted above her, right? Mm. So we just walked into management and said, we're leaving. So we had 10 weeks of pay. We had, I think, about 2 months worth of savings at the time. So we thought, we'll survive, yeah. And the first thing we realized was there's something called cash flow, right? Because our portfolio was big, but it was quite negative, which was being masked by the income that was coming in. We were living quite frugally, yeah. And then we started to say, okay, do we go back to radiography or do we start helping people? And one of the first things that caught my eye was that, okay, we could do finance that's got a trailing income. It's in line with my newfound expertise. So we tilted towards mortgage broking, and that went really well. But then I was still not happy because I'd mentor these people, would find loan solutions for people, and then they'd go out in the big bad world and buy the wrong types of properties and actually go backwards rather than forwards, right? So during the GFC, we pivoted and we went full on into the buyer's agency side of things and property advisory. And I've never looked back. And I'm proud to say that we've helped thousands of people build big portfolios, right? So if you look at the standard stats in Australia, there is about 1,800 property investors that own one property. Then there's about 400 odd that own two properties. And then by the time you hit 4 or 5 properties, you're really talking about 30,000 people. And when you get into, say, 20 properties, not I'm advocating you have to own 20 properties, right? But just in terms of stats, when you hit 20 properties, there is less than 200 people that own more than 20 properties in Australia, right? Now, this is from ATO, obviously, in terms of the stats. So that could be that, they're in different entities and all that. But they have a reflection in terms of the general public. And my mission is to move that needle more towards, not just 1 or 2 properties, but own multiple so that you can actually get generational wealth and true retirement out of properties.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing such an incredible journey that you've had. I'd like to hear more about, what you think of what's happening in the current market. You mentioned that you went to so many seminars and you educated yourself, and back in those days, you'd have to physically go somewhere. But these days, a lot of information is online.
Yes.
And when there's so much information, how do people weed out what's actually valuable versus what's not? How do you actually learn and trust someone?
Yeah. If I can give an analogy, right? So let's say you're a young teenager, right? And you want to get a drink of water and the tap faucet is slow. So you're able to then actually enjoy the water and also you're not being overwhelmed, right? Right now, where the industry is and where information is, it's like drinking out of a fire hydrant, right? You practically drown in the information, and I think that's the biggest thing that's going to shape the industry and shape people's wealth is the ease of getting information, but not having the ability to cross-check it because everything's so fast-paced and everything's so instant. I want instant gratification. It has a good side to it where information is easy to get hold of, but it's also got a really bad side to it because you're not getting your second thoughts first in terms of property investing.
So Victor, going back to your journey, right? It doesn't happen overnight, and it's obviously comes down a lot to mindset and goal setting. So I'm actually curious about how do you set your goals and how do you dream big?
Yeah. You need to be coming back into that goals on a daily basis, right? So it needs to be able to get you out of bed. So it has a sense of purpose, not just a fluffy goal to begin with. And I'm a bit mindful not to say dream big. I would say that, yes, set up big goals, but you need to be dreaming up the milestones first. So dream realistic as opposed to dream big. We tend to become very cliched in terms of how we approach investing, how we approach life. So if you bring it back to granular, it actually becomes more tangible, right? So whilst you have got the big goal, you need to dial in your it's like a car journey, right? So if you're going say from Sydney to Brisbane on a drive, you need to dial in the stops as well from the rest breaks. but also the refueling and also your convenience breaks, right? So that's true for property journey or for life itself. If you're totally focused just on that one thing, you tend to lose the periphery of enjoying the journey as well.
That's right. But like, did you ever think that this is where I'll end up? Like when you first arrived in Australia versus now, did you have a direction in mind?
Look, success at this level? No. Yeah. Our initial goal was to replace Reshmi's income, which was $23,000 a year, right? And which we surpassed that way early in the piece. Our biggest advantage of goal setting and all that was we actually attended a lot of seminars, and one of them was Anthony Robbins' seminar, that really shaped our lives because we actually sat down. We didn't sleep for 3 days, right? We sat down, we mapped out our goals, and we found what was common and what was wishful thinking and what was really not ego driven. And we've been working on that goal, and we've added more stuff to it as families happened and as experience has shaped our mindset. We keep adding to that, and we keep ticking off goals as well.
So it's a lot about mindset then, really, more than anything, because I guess someone can continue living their life and just day-to-day grind and go to work and not think beyond that, or come home and watch TV, but versus utilizing that time effectively and really investing in refining your goals and really ticking them off.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the biggest curse we have in Australia is being middle class, right? So we're comfortable, right? Unless there is pain, whether it is personally induced through your goal setting or whether it is external pressure where you're not happy where you are, you can't really grow.
Well, adversity, right? When you have adversity and challenges that really pushes you to do something in your life.
That's right, yeah.
And Victor, obviously in the industry, you've seen different property cycles. You've seen rental yields, even 7, 8, 9% in Sydney at one point, Brisbane, and then Perth. How do you explain to people who are still looking for positive cash flow? Because there's a lot of marketing out there.
Yeah.
Retire on passive income, get this positive cash flow, when it's not really realistic in today's market.
It's not. Look, you could get positive cash flow properties, but they are riskier in today's market. I'm talking specifically residential property. And if you go you go far out. So I was talking to a client who's got a property in a mining town in Queensland, right? And he's got a 10% yield on his property. He's trying to get rid of it at the moment. In the high days, it was about 20% yield, right? Now he's trying to get rid of it now because it's actually gone down in value. It's actually holding him back from his portfolio, and he can't sell it at the moment. There's no buyers for it, even though it's a 10% yield, because of the demographics in that area, the shift and the reliance of people on just data, right? So if I look at just positive, you need to have a game plan to get to positive, right? It's not positive from the outset. So if you were to tick all the investment boxes in terms of criteria and have an investment grade property, you are in negative cash flow in the beginning. You can cheat in and put a cash deposit in and make it neutral or positive. But if you're realistic in doing your full exposure, so your stamp duties, your buyer's agency fees, your solicitor's fees, and the primary loan itself, it is negative, right? Especially if you're buying an investment grade property.
Yeah. Well, going back to the mining town, right? Like example, we met someone early when we had established Property Twins. This couple, they wanted to chat with us, and they mentioned they had bought 2 properties in the mining towns for $300K each. At the peak, they were worth $600K when they should have technically sold them. Yeah. And now they were worth $150K each. So it's just massive opportunity cost. Yeah.
So when it is too good to be true, it usually is, right?
But like in the current market, right, there's a lot of talk of data, looking at data and people buying in all sorts of locations because the data says so. What's your view of that?
Data in isolation is very dangerous. It is extremely dangerous because you're not putting a human element to it. Ultimately, the end user of your investment is a human being, right? And the human being would be looking at it from a life cycle, from a job cycle, and the feel and vibe of it, and also the income coming into that community. And here's a really, really easy example, right? Let's say that, the area's median price was, and I'm making this up, right? The area's median price was 200,000, right? And you have a property that sells, a group of properties that sell for 210. All of a sudden, data is telling you that that area has gone up substantially in value, right? But you need to dial back down to the granular, and you need to relate the data to real life perspective. So physically go to that area, feel the vibe, see whether you will be comfortable living there. Put your circumstances aside in terms of your income, but let's say you're starting and you're comfortable living there as an owner-occupier, right? Because ultimately, the liquidity of your portfolio is from an owner-occupier buying your property off you as opposed to an investor.
Absolutely. So investor-driven areas don't always make the best investments.
No. If it's an investor-driven area, you want to be early into that area and be out of their area when it becomes a frenzy. And that way you maintain your liquidity in there. People lose money in property because of cash flow. And the second reason they lose money is because of lack of liquidity from a equity point of view, because they're no longer, as you'd know, no longer as attractive to the bank. The balance sheet is impacted. And it's also the mindset thing, right? So when a property value drops, human nature is that you want to offload it. And I call that the sleep at night factor. And if you don't address that right in the outset, and you're purely data-driven off the back of a desktop, you're just really asking for trouble because you're still very much shooting in the dark. It's unfortunately, in this day and age, there's a lot of people that are just sugarcoating things and saying data. Data is just one small piece of the puzzle.
But that's a selling point, right?
Yes.
Especially in the ever-growing buyers agency industry where everybody's talking about data.
Yeah.
When fundamentals just get ignored. I mean, I had a client recently who asked, what do you look at? I mean, the mental checklist is so big.
It is.
I had to actually go back and get our team to put together what exactly we are looking at. And it came down to 60 points. And I don't think that's even...
That's not even complete, is it?
It's not.
Yeah. Because there is that, the gut feel of property investing, right?
Yeah.
And that's not talked about often.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of if the gut feel is not right, you walk away, right? So I was down in Interstate in Melbourne yesterday, and there was an area we were evaluating. Houses looked absolutely, and the numbers looked good. I drove in there into the suburb. One of the things I do is go to the shopping centres, right? And that's a big tell in terms of an area. And I immediately called the team and said, we're not buying in here. We're not buying in here, right? So any new area I go to, even though the data leads me there, I physically go in there. If I were just looking at data alone, we would be buying bucket loads in there. But one drive into that suburb, and I'm saying, no, we're not buying here because it's just a flash in the pan. There's no real fundamentals to the demographics. There's no real fundamentals to the vibe of the area, even though it's fairly close to the city.
And then it goes to like talking about property cycles, right? Australia has a number of capital cities and or states have capital cities, and they're at a different point in the cycle. The property cycle is one thing, then data is another thing. We work off property cycles and complement it with data, not just data itself. What's your view of that?
I'm so glad you've said that because when you're looking at cycles in an area, it then helps you determine the type of property you buy in that area for your portfolio, right? So we need to understand. So everyone, when you're talking about cycles, they assume it's just the price cycle, right? But there's several cycles that overlay over each other to be able to make that holistic cycle. Yeah. So what are they? Obviously, the price cycle. So what people generally call the property cycle. Then there's the rent cycle in that area, right? And it ebbs and flows, right? So a good example is the mining towns that we talked about. The rents, when the rent cycle's at the peak, that's the time to offload. Yeah, in that scenario. Then you've got the media cycle, the sentiment of the media. are they reporting feel-good stories? One of the things in journalism is if it bleeds, it leads, right? So you generally tend to get the bad stories in most areas, that the not so feel-good stories. And then, of course, you've got the finance cycle, right, that overlays everything. And then to really top it all off, you have the age cycle, so where you are in terms of life, right? So property-wise, in terms of property cycle, it could be at the bottom, it could be at the top, but there are micro cycles within that cycle in each state, right? It could be that the whole state is going downwards, because remember, we're talking about averages over here at the end of the day, right? So we need to then find a cluster where there is still momentum, and that determines the property cycle in that suburb, in that even street, down to that granular level. And that can't be mapped out with data. Physical, you have to be physical on the ground, right? Then the rent cycle is more, okay, is your tenancy type changing, right? If they're more older people renting, okay, that has got a point, but they may have a capped limitation in terms of the affordability, so the money flowing through that community. If it's a younger population, they tend to stick around longer, especially if there's good schools around. When the kids are gone, then they start looking at different horizons. And then, of course, after that, we look at okay, where is the media cycle in that area, right? So it could be that everyone's reporting, the investors are leaving in the droves, and there's a bad failed project. That's music to my ears, right? Because, like you said earlier, right, adversity brings opportunity, right? We just need to. Opportunity is like an onion, right? It comes wrapped up in problems. Right? You need to learn how to peel the layers without getting tears in your eyes to get to the opportunity, right? And so that's when we look at these cycles, you're really looking at this, right? And like I said, the final piece is the life cycle. So someone that's starting early, the type of property that they're buying would be very different to someone that's starting, say, when you get the aha moment at age 55, as an example, that property is very different to what you would have bought at age 30 or 20, because you need to get it 100% right, because you don't have time to recover. You don't have time on your side to forgive any mistakes, right? So you need to actually be creating the movement. So in the early stages, if you look at it from a investing point of view, you want the property market. So this is media, all the bits up. You want that to move the needle first, and then you add more movement by doing some renovations, so forth, right? As you're older, you want to move the needle first, and then get the property market to move the needle. So it still then allows you to buy in areas that is at a peak. So good example would be, say, Perth. Could be Brisbane, could be South Australia. It allows you to buy, even if you're older, it allows you to buy properties still there, even though they've got longer cycles, and it's almost at a peak, as opposed to maybe the affordability factor from a cash flow point of view is not in Sydney, not in Melbourne, as that example. I use Melbourne and Sydney interchangeably in the sense of New South Wales and Victoria. Bad habit I picked up. But they are the things that you need to look at from a cycle point of view. I know it's a long-winded answer in terms of cycle, but we need to really, really get away from all this journalistic approach that we have of talking about property cycles related just to price. There are several cycles that we need to overlay to get to one cycle for yourself.
Sure. And Victor, what's your view of these off-the-plan properties, right? Like often these sellers' agents or developers' agents are disguising themselves as buyers' agents and saying, oh, it doesn't cost you anything. And what's your view of brand new properties? Have you ever bought one yourself? Okay,
full disclosure, I have, yes. In the very early pieces, I bought my second two villas were actually, second three villas were actually off a developer. They're fully built. But we got a discount on that, right? More good luck than good management at that time. And then we did a few option trading with off the plans. We're talking back here 2000, 2001. Yeah. There's some, if it works well, right? But here are the problems. You're usually paying tomorrow's price today. Gone are the days of when you're paying, today for getting that upswing for tomorrow's price, right? So you're paying lower. Now the because of all the marketing and all that, they've already built in that margin. Then there's variances in the contract that you actually don't get what you've paid for. In most cases, the developer is within their rights to vary that floor space and orientation within 10%, and it's still acceptable. And you don't know the quality, yeah. But more importantly, the two things that you don't know, which is very future-based, is, well, first of all, the finance. Is finance going to be there, right? And what's going to happen in life? And so where are your comparables in terms of, okay, if the market stagnates, well, let's use a tangible example here. So during COVID, we had 2.5% interest rates, right? And so you'd exchange on and off the plan. It takes, because of COVID, it's taken, say, 2 years to build instead of the 1 year that was projected. And the assessment rate changes, right? So all of a sudden...
High risk.
Yeah, high risk, right? So you're now not able to buy that property because you haven't got the funding.
Yeah.
And now the developer's locking you into the contract because they're after their money, right? So you're now having to sell down properties or leverage a lot higher on other properties you may have, or even take a hit. So it may work in the right areas. Yes, it will. But if you're going to build a tangible portfolio and not put everything at risk, I'm a big fan of established properties.
Yeah, and I guess we don't know, right? Like how things roll. You've bought the property and then you're stuck with it. And I don't recall a time when I heard a good story. Yes, some people have done really well with house and land packages, etc. But more often than not, I've seen people looking back and regretting that they actually got stuck with the property and they were not able to expand. Like people buying it at the peak in Brisbane market or even in Sydney market and not being able to expand. And Moina had one where the client had 6 years from the time they signed the contract.
They bought in end of 2016, early 2017. They signed contracts for off-the-plan apartments in Kellyville, and it settled in 2022.
So it'd taken them out of the market for 6 years.
Yeah. So they could have gone in another market, made money, maybe doubled their money in that time.
Yeah.
Then talking about mistakes that you see people make, say what are the common mistakes people should avoid if they want to be successful at property investing?
So whenever I talk to a successful investor, and this is my clients and my network, one of the last questions I always ask them is, what would you have done differently? And what's your mistake? They all say, I wish I had gone harder in the early days, right? The major mistakes most people make, especially when they're starting out, is the herd mentality. So they're investing where everyone else is investing rather than taking their own circumstances into account. And if you're doing what everyone else is doing, you'll get their results, right? A la the 1.8 million people that own one property. Yeah. So that's the biggest mistake, is having that herd mentality and using social media as your guru to invest. Right. So if everyone's buying in Perth, it's got phenomenal growth. I'm not going to check where the market's at. I'm not going to check whether there's got still liquidity for me. I'm going to buy there because look, John down the road, he made 150K in 2 years. I'm going to emulate that. But you're starting a year later.
Yeah.
And that's where the biggest mistake comes in. The second biggest mistake is fluffing on the figures, right? And throwing in tax incentives. It's a sovereign risk, right? It can change on a dime, no pun intended. And if you totally reliant on tax incentives and totally reliant on you having a consistent employment with the bonuses coming in as they are at the moment, you're just getting into the wrong property. And I respect that there'll be some people, if you take negative gearing away, there'll be some people that'll do hard because they've they've taken the tax minimization approach to investing, which is the wrong approach. But me, as someone that has got multiple properties, I'd say bring it on. Bring it on, because I'll go through my hard slog for the next 8 months when they've taken the negative gearing away. But if you look at it historically, we tried this once before.
Yeah.
And what really happened was that they had to repeal that ordinance really quickly because investors were leaving in the droves. But the ones that stuck through, remember how adversity brings opportunities, right? The ones that stuck through, the rents went up 40%, right? And you can fact check this historically, right? So this is during the Paul Keating days. The rent went up 40% in most areas. Then when they repealed it and they said, no, you got to bring the rents down. Guess how much the rent came down? None to 10%. Right? So we've picked up 40% more cash flow off the back of a bad decision.
That's a lot on a large portfolio.
Yes.
It grows, it's ever compounding as well.
Yeah. And so whenever you look at any of these sovereign risks, like so right now, if you look at Victoria, right, they've got the land tax situation where they lowered the threshold down to 50,000. In other words, if you're buying an investment grade property, you are paying land tax. Yeah. It's taken a lot of investors out of the market, which means that we can now buy the houses cheaper.
Yeah, absolutely. There's more opportunity.
Yeah.
So let's talk about negative gearing, because it's concerning some people who are starting out as property investors and they're like, well, should I not? How will it impact? So what would you say to someone who's actually of two minds about it?
The first thing I'd say is that, look, do you actually have control over government policy? Right?
You can only control your own economy.
Exactly. So you need to bring it down to household economy. Take all the tax incentives away. It's money in, money out. Right? And if it doesn't push you back to 2-minute noodles, then investing's fine, right? But if you're reliant on government incentives to help hold on the property, mind you, it helps, right? Having those tax incentives, it helps. But it's very much reliant on two very simple things: government regulation and you paying tax, right? So I would beg to think that I'm investing so that I don't have a job, right? Which brings back to, lending. Most lenders would say, no, you're too rent reliant, but that's the whole idea, right? But if you're talking negative gearing, take that away. Take it away.
Oh, really? For a short time.
For a short time, yeah, absolutely. I know it's controversial, but it will create huge opportunities for those that are really dialed into the portfolio and have invested the correct way and not reliant on these incentives.
Victor, I also want you to shed light on spruikers. There's a season of different types of things people say or do. In more recent times, you have unlimited borrowing capacity with buying in a trust. Like I've had so many clients pick up the phone and say, hey, can we do this? So I have unlimited borrowing capacity.
Yeah.
Well, what's your view of that?
At the risk of offending people, it is absolute BS. You're not telling the full story. Yeah. The deposit needs to come from somewhere. So if you take that exposure into account, right? So you're actually into negative cash. So bring it back to, yes, could borrow unlimited if the accountant's fudging the figures for you and saying, yes, this entity is self-reliant and the affordability factor is there. So on that basis, yes. But if you look at it truly, this is where you would get into trouble, financial trouble, because you're not doing the figures correctly. Your deposit's coming from somewhere. You're forcing it to become positive, and therefore it has got unlimited borrowing capacity in that sense, or you're bringing money in deposits from another entity.
Yeah,
money needs to come from somewhere, right? You can't create money out of thin air.
Well, you're still paying interest on it, and unfortunately, the same crowd wants positive cash flow as well. And how do you have it positive cash flow when there's no tax benefits or immediate tax benefits if you buy in a trust? Anyway.
Yeah. So on a technicality, yes, it is possible to have unlimited borrowing capacity. But when you bring it down to real life, no.
So what should someone do if they want to have a lot of borrowing capacity?
Buy the right types of properties, get good income, less discretionary spending. Don't buy the Ferrari. And also make sure that you you're scaling really early in the piece before you've actually got family. Because the minute, as you know, as soon as we've got dependents, as soon as you've got, the credit cards and the car leases and all that, it just kills your borrowing capacity. Ultimately, property portfolios are driven by the fuel, and the fuel is finance. If you can't get finance, you can't get fuel. You can't go anywhere.
Well, people think it's about the property when the right property is important, but if you can't access, as you said, that is the vehicle. Property is just a vehicle.
Property is just a vehicle. Yeah, I agree. And if we could get the same thing from buying bananas, we'd do that, right? Yeah. But it's just the property is more forgiving over the longer period, so long as you take a medium-term approach in investing.
And Victor, do you have any thoughts on delaying gratification? Because you mentioned people should go hard early in their portfolio. So, obviously sounds like you really lived a very humble life while you were growing this portfolio. So would be open to hearing.
Yeah, well, look, in the early days, Reshmi and I decided that we'll defer having a family until we've got the portfolio to a certain level. We were not going out, didn't have lavish holidays. In fact, a couple of years we didn't have any holidays at all, right? And now we've got full discretion to spend our money and so it's a bit of delayed gratification. But the other side of the coin is just as right? We are investing for lifestyle, so we don't want to have investing be the everything in life. You need to have lifestyle first, investing in the background, and this is after years of doing it the other way, right? Because you've got only one shot at life, and if you've got kids, the kids grow up really fast. You get old really fast as well. Not talking about you two, of course. You get old really fast, and then you also look at it from a viewpoint of, okay, I'm creating all this wealth. I need to be healthy enough, and I need to have enough time left in life to actually enjoy the fruits of my labor, right? Yeah. And early on, you commented, I look the same. I actively look after myself because I want to enjoy my wealth, my labor with my kids. So that means not just working on the portfolio. I need to work on myself as well as a human being, as a person, to first of all stay humble and then also stay healthy, right? There's no sense having wealth if you're not healthy. You ask any person that's about to cark it, right? Would you rather lose everything, all your money, and have life, or would you keep your coins? Yeah. Everyone will say, "I'll have more life."
Yeah, absolutely. And Victor, is there anything like you've obviously made it in life with business and family and what you've achieved? Is there something that you've splurged on that earlier on you couldn't?
I don't have many vices apart from if people are from Fiji or the South Pacific, kava, which is a national drink, which I enjoy with my friends. I did splurge on cars, and that was a phase in life where I just wanted to prove to myself, yes, I can enjoy it. Cars, boats, and all, they don't give you pleasure. It's family, it's friends, and it's the sense of achievement that gives you the pleasure.
So we've got Victor's book, Supercharge Your Property Portfolio. So if anybody, you want the book, please email us, info@propertytwins.com.au. And
we've got a couple of copies to
hand out, a few copies to hand out. And Victor, if anyone wants to go to your website directly as well, right, propertygroup.com.au, you can also order a copy from there. Thank you so much, Victor, for making the time. I know time is very valuable, and we so appreciate you making this for us.
Thank you, and it's really, really pleasurable seeing the journey you two have gone through, and mapping out the future that you've got, and the ability to help other people. And it's a big accolade from where you were at 2019 when we first met. 2014, yeah.
2010, sorry.
Right. Yeah, but we'll agree on 2010 then. But it's certainly, I've followed your journey over the years, and it's really gratifying to see the goals that you two are kicking.
Thanks, Victor. Thanks so much.